Welcome to Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. This podcast is about the journey to a more sustainable future in order for us to be able to do our bit to achieve net zero. I'll be discussing a variety of topics with experts in their field in order to educate and increase our knowledge of clean energy, electric vehicles and the electric vehicle infrastructure. So whether you're an individual wanting to make a difference at home, a small business or a corporate, this podcast is just for you. Today on the podcast, I've actually got Andy Eastlake, and he is the Chief Executive of Zemo Partnership. So, Andy, thank you ever so much for joining me. We've spoken once before, haven't we? It's lovely to see you.
Pleasure to be here. No, it's really good to speak to you. I've seen quite a number of the podcasts so far, so you've had some great people on recently.
Oh, the number of people that I've had on, that it's blown my mind. The amount of knowledge, the things that I'm learning. I have to keep listening back to my own podcast episodes to go, and what did that person say? So it's just amazing. It's brilliant.
Yeah, there's some really good nuggets in there. I listened, as I say, Sam Clark I thought was great, and Graham the other day. He's always brilliant.
Oh, so I'm expecting fantastic things from today.
I'll do my best.
Oh, I'm sure. I know we've already talked, so I already know you're going to be fabulous. Right. So, can you give me a little bit of background to how you got into your role at Zemo? What's kind of your background before Zemo, and what did you get? What did you do to get to where you are now?
Yeah. Well, I guess it's I'm a car guy by nature, so I engineering sort of brain, and that took me into engineering as a degree. And I actually joined Vauxhall Motors in the early 80s as part of a graduate sort of sponsored degree process. So I went straight into the automotive industry. I had two options when I was training at school for sponsorship. One was small arms, rifles and things, and the other one was Vauxhalls. And I preferred cars to killing people, so cars it was. And so I spent my formative years at Vauxhalls, and I think I joined at what I think was a really, really exciting time in the automotive industry. We're going through another one at the moment, without a doubt, but I do think it's that really formed my sort of approach and my persona. And it was really when emissions testing. So I joined, and I went I actually worked for the bulk of my career at Millbrook Proving Ground at the test track, now UTAC, of course. But I joined them, I think I went there first time in the must have been 85, 86. And it was right at the time when we were changing from carburetors to electronic fuel injection. So we were seeing how sort of control of that fuel into engines suddenly opened up all sorts of opportunities and made it a whole raft better in terms of what you could do. And that one of the nuggets that I sort of came away from that is that nothing's perfect, but everything can be better. And I think that's kind of how I've tried to think about it. And the other key thing that taught me was, if you can't measure it, you probably can't improve it. So my background wasn't so much on developing the cars and the injection. It was about measuring it and helping those people that knew what they were doing see what the effect of their changes were. So my whole activity was developing emissions measurement. So I started out, we were only looking at hydrocarbons and CO. Late 80s, we introduced NOx measurement. 88, I think particulates came into, late 80s, we started measuring particulates from cars and things. And that was what got me going. And I started to try and push the boundaries or use whatever I could find. So we brought some equipment over from the States and started looking at things like aldehydes and things like that from vehicles, so non-regulated emissions. I started doing things with particle sizing. So you'll have come across, PM 2.5 and those things. So back in the early 90s, we were measuring particle size and formation. One of the only places in the UK that was doing that. So it was that passion about, right, can I measure things better? Can I therefore inform people? And how do we make that whole sort of area go forward? And that's really, I think ultimately that took me to where I am now, in that policy should be driven by sort of really good evidence, really good measurement, really good sort of information. And it was from that sort of really engineering fundamental car space. Well, how do we make a difference with what we can now do? And that's really where, I mean, I actually took on the role of sort of the representative for General Motors at the Low Carbon Vehicle Partnership when it formed. So that was Low CVP, which was the precursor to Zemo. We changed our name in 2021, I think it was. So yeah, a year or two ago, from Low CVP. But I actually sort of was part of the formation of Low CVP back in 2002, 2003. And that again was sort of, that interface with government, that the role of policy, the role of government, together with the benefits of engineering and the skilled automotive engineers, that is a sort of harmonious combination. And then the person that is always forgotten, and one of the things I like about Zemo is come back to the user. It ultimately, it doesn't matter what we make, how we measure it, or what the policymakers say. If you can't sell it and the user isn't engaged, you've kind of got it wrong. So that was why you ended up with this sort of melee, I would say, almost of policy, engineering, consumer information, which is really interesting space to be part of.
I was going to say, actually, in continuous improvement, we call that the voice of the customer.
Yeah.
Which is really, really important, isn't it? Actually understanding what your customer wants, what the voice of the customer actually is. Because, like you say, there's no point if you don't understand what they're saying to you.
Well, I think it comes back to that point about, nothing's perfect, but everything can be better. But different people have a different perspective on what better means. Does that mean more range? Does it mean a lighter weight vehicle? Does it mean lower emissions? Does it mean cheaper? Everybody's perspective of better is different. And you kind of need all of them, because ultimately everything is going to be a bit of a compromise, because nothing's perfect. So it's about sort of squaring that circle of different perspectives and trying to really bring it into an optimum, or as optimum as you can get, solution.
So if we're looking at kind of Zemo and what you do with regards to how do you work hand in hand with a lot of the government policy, don't you? So how's it evolving? How's it work?
So Zemo was set up originally, as I say, 20 years ago, and it was originally fully funded by government, and it was it was a great example of joined up government. We had Treasury, Environment, Transport, Business, all at the table saying, we want this low carbon vehicle partnership and this low carbon agenda on vehicles to be a success for the environment, a success for the customers, success for the industry in the UK. And so, there was a real coalition of the willing trying to move in the same direction, which was great. And I think that's what we've retained. And climate change, which is ultimately because we predate the Climate Change Act, in fact. And that's obviously one of the key pieces of legislation that we're sort of working towards. And that was what drove us to the Zemo change, net zero as a change from being, we've got to get down to an 80% reduction in carbon in 2050. That net zero agenda that Theresa May brought in 2019 said, actually, we've got to get down to net zero. Right. Low is no longer enough. So actually, low carbon vehicle partnership isn't the right thing to be calling ourselves. Let's move on to a sort of zero focused. So that was kind of the backdrop to that. But everybody around our table is part of trying to get to net zero. They might disagree on how you get there and how quickly you get there, but they all have that common sort of thread, and that's what I think is really useful. So now, I joined, officially took over the organisation back in 2012, and that was right at the time when we were moving from fully funded by government to being a sort of part membership funded, part project funded, but still government supported. So now we get a grant from the DFT, the decarbonisation team within the Department for Transport support us with an annual grant. We have a structure of membership fees. So we've got about 250 member companies who pay a fee. Hopefully we keep that reasonably affordable. And then there's a number of projects that we get sort of supported to do. We're not going after consultancy. I think that's really important. A lot of our members are some of the big consultancy organisations, so we're not competing with them, but we're certainly trying to help in the public funded space. So I'm doing work for Transport Scotland at the moment on air quality retrofits, retrofit systems for vehicles. We're doing other work for the Department for Transport at the moment about zero emission ancillary units. So if you think about the donkey engines that you have on a refrigerated truck or the trailer, at the moment they're out of scope of all of our zero emission vehicles. So you've got a Euro 6 truck pulling this potentially very dirty trailer. So we're doing some research into how do we clean those up, how do we take those to net zero, as well as the truck, of course. We've done work for a number of different public funded parties in that space. So that's the way we function. But as you say, hand in glove with the government departments across all of the DFT, but then also into environment and into BEIS and what is now the sort of DENS. I'm not sure how to pronounce it yet, but Department for the sort of net zero and things that Grant Shapps is leading. So we do cross government still, which again I think is really important. We're not sort of a one trick pony. We're trying to join up the dots across a lot of different spaces.
Oh, that's good. So you were just talking. You mentioned air quality retrofits then, and it just got me thinking of something that I saw over the weekend. I think it was Paul Kirby that shared it about kind of there was a young girl that died, and part of the they were talking about poor air quality, weren't they? That actually was a massive contributor to her death.
Yeah, absolutely. So and you know, her mother has been a huge champion of the air quality agenda, particularly within London. But within our remit, we have at Zemo we have an air quality mandate and a climate change mandate, and the two go hand in hand. So clearly, zero tailpipe emissions is a huge leap forward in addressing both aspects of that, providing we know where the energy is coming from. But it doesn't solve all the problems. You know, there are still issues with brake wear particulates, for tyre wear particulates. There's things there that we the job is not done when we remove the combustion engine from a vehicle. And it's also, I think, people forget the time it takes to transition a fleet. So we've got 40 million vehicles on the road. I think we sold about 1.7 million cars. It's going to take a long time for all of these vehicles to be zero tailpipe emissions. So what can we do in the meantime to clean up the rest of the vehicles? And that means cleaning up from an air quality pollutant, but also from a carbon perspective. So that's where things like renewable fuels in what people refer to as dirty diesels, actually diesels now are 98% cleaner than they used to be 20 years ago when I first started. So we've come a long way, and it's really important that we don't sort of ignore the fact that actually we've done a huge amount to improve air quality, and there's still more we can do. So I'm a great supporter of things like the ULEZ, clean air zones, and those policy sort of arrangements, those policy levers that encourage and help people and fleets to think about cleaning up their vehicles themselves, with retrofit, with funding, or changing their travel behaviours, or if you can go to an electric vehicle, great. So there's lots and lots of options, and it's about trying to find the right ones for different people. But air quality is a really immediate issue, and as well as the climate change sort of agenda that we focus on as well.
And I think what you just said there about changing your travel behaviour is so important, isn't it? Because it isn't. The more people I talk to people about this, the more it kind of makes me realise that, for my role, I do drive quite a lot. So my aim is, because I can't really do what I do and not drive a car. So for me, it's about, I don't want to be kicking out. I don't want to have anything coming out my tailpipe if I can help it. So mine is my educating myself to kind of get to that point. But for example, and I've talked about this before on the podcast, my husband, who's a professor of climate science, he doesn't want to drive. He doesn't need to drive. He works at the university. He'll either get public transport there, he'll walk, he'll cycle, But lots of people don't realise that there's lots of people who are kind of very negative about people, wanting to move to EVs, for example, or kind of the infrastructure, etc., etc. There's quite a lot of negativity in the press, isn't there? Because they kind of push it out, anything that, has a go at anybody. When what they need to think about is the fact that we don't want any other people dying of air pollution. Do we?
It's really difficult, as you say. It's become almost evangelistic in some respects, which I think is not actually helpful. Different people have different needs. Travel needs, transport needs. The trick is to try and help everybody make the next step. So that next step might be it might be getting a cleaner car. It might be going all the way to an electric car. It might be not having a car at all and using public transport. It might be cycling everywhere. But everybody, and it comes back to that sort of mantra. Everything can be made better, step by step. But nothing is perfect in this world. If everybody had an electric vehicle, if we had 40 million electric vehicles in 2050, we've probably not succeeded. Electric cars, we've probably not succeeded because we've still got the same congestion. We've still got, all this resource that we've got. So we've got to be moving towards a far more efficient use of space, resources, energy, all of the above, if we possibly can. But that, it's not easy. So fortunately, I'm not tasked with making the biggest decisions on this, but hopefully helping everybody think about whether that's fleets particularly and users about what they can do slightly differently to actually move forward. But I'm a great believer in everybody can move forward, but not everybody can take those same big steps. Not everybody can afford an electric car at the moment.
No, exactly. And you know what? I was thinking back to during the pandemic, when more people started working from home, because that was kind of a bit of a before the pandemic, there were so many large companies. I've worked from home on and off for years, but I'm out, or I'm working from home, or I'm out again, But it was kind of a bit of a sore point for some companies, wasn't it? For a long time, and then all of a sudden we changed. We kind of, it was you had no choice. You had to work from home, and it seemed, and I totally get it for mental health reasons, because it's good for people to be working in an environment with other people that they can actually converse with, for example. But there are still some companies that were forcing their staff to go back to work in the office, when actually it's probably putting more stress on their mental health, having to commute again.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, and I probably come from the old school where working from home, you didn't trust that someone was actually doing anything at home, or that's probably where I was back in the day. And then, as you say, we were all forced to make it function, to actually work. And I brought in some new staff during the pandemic, who they literally never met each other until 3 years or two years down the line, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I think the hybrid is really important. I think it's really difficult to mentor young staff, junior members of staff over Zoom or like this. You really can't do that. But there are times when actually sat at home squirreling away in a darkened room trying to work on a huge spreadsheet or something, it's the best way of doing it. So a hybrid approach, but yeah, getting that to work and keeping a team together remotely or in a hybrid way is quite hard. We're grappling with it, as I'm sure many companies are. But I think we'll emerge the other side in better shape. But we need a travel system. So I go into London maybe twice a week, and we need a robust travel system that allows us to do that and helps us and is affordable, is low carbon, is all of the things that we're looking for, and that's really, really important.
Because I was thinking as well, when we were all working from home, when we didn't have a choice, and I'm not saying that everybody was working from home, because I know there was still, obviously, there were still people, kind of on the front line in kind of NHS and all the other services, kind of well, not necessarily hospitality, because that was kind of shut down, wasn't it? But kind of retail, for example, that people were travelling a lot less. But then there was this big push to get people back into the towns and cities, wasn't there? So it kind of felt like we were going in a direction, and then it was kind of, and we were forced to do this, weren't we? We had no choice. So the people who didn't like change, you just had to change because that was it, But then all of a sudden, right, it's kind of like, right, okay, you've got to do this now. You've got to go in this other direction, back the way you were going. So you again, I don't know what the levels of air pollution were during, or lower levels during COVID.
Well, I mean, transport is one of the has been one of the biggest. It's been the biggest sector in terms of climate change and greenhouse gases, and one of the biggest contributors to some of the air pollution issues over the years, and NOx and particulates. And it's still, it's still there as a key piece of it. Certainly, air pollution improved significantly during lockdown when people weren't driving as much, and there's also some really good evidence about the effect of clean air zones and the ULEZ and things like that, and the impact that those policies have had. The way that travel's recovered is interesting, and is something that we've looked at quite carefully. But people aren't driving as much during the week, but they're now driving more during the weekend. So there's a bit more sort of, and public transport use. I haven't checked the stats recently, but that certainly wasn't back to where it used to be in terms of public transport. And I think there's a danger. I remember, some of the early ministers actually, 2 or 3 years ago, talking about we don't want it to be a car-led recovery in terms of coming out of the pandemic. And I think it has been a bit car-led.
Yes.
Albeit that, if you talk to the automotive industry, they're still not back to where they were in terms of sales, and partly down to supply chain. So, there's a lot of different things at play here. We want a successful automotive industry, but at the same time, we're saying we don't want a car-led recovery. Well, how can you square those two sort of perspectives? It's a really, really challenging time, I think, that we've gone through. We are emerging. There's no doubt about it, and I think hopefully we're all finding our way. And if we can get to the point of questioning some of the travel, and the shorter journeys. Let's grab all of that health and I used to walk and cycle a lot more during lockdown than I probably do today. But actually, can we get back to some of that so that we're shifting in the right direction? Like I say, a bit better, a bit less impact on the environment every day.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, it's funny. When you were saying then about that less travel, I've noticed. So a lot of the work that I'm doing at the moment is kind of Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays where I'm out and about, and those are the days that seems to be, and I'm assuming that if you kind of think the rule of thumb is people used to work 5 days and they always used to work out and about. You'd have to get in the car, blah blah blah. But now it seems to be like a sort of a mix. So I'd say Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is quite bad. The traffic for me is quite bad, especially so I'm kind of M4, M25, kind of round that way, and you always know, or M40, and it's always a bit shocking. If I can get anywhere in less than an hour, I'm always amazed. But kind of Mondays and Fridays for me, and this is I've got nothing, I've got no data to back this up. This is just me personally saying this, especially on a Friday, getting to somewhere like, so I drive from Reading to Uxbridge because I've got some work over there, and that is a joy on a Friday.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm commuting into London, and out of preference, I'll probably go in on a Monday or Friday because there is no doubt that it's a lot quieter those days, and we are back up to crowding into the tubes on a Tuesday to get into town. So it's and as I say, there are times when you do want everyone together and you want to create that environment. And there are times when actually, whether it's at home or indeed in a quieter office, there's benefits. So it's a really interesting time at the moment, and how we make the transport system work for people. Because you look at the trains and some of the problems we're having there. Headlines even today about buses and the reduction in bus services. Buses are the backbone of our public transport system, and we've done a lot of work in that space, and there's some really good initiatives there. They're one of the first places that should be going electric, urban, high density urban sort of activity. So we're really, really pro electric zero-emission buses, in as much as possible. And in fact, I think 50% of the buses sold last year were zero emissions. So
Were
it's
they?
actually a sector that's moving pretty rapidly, more rapidly than you realise. We all talk about the cars, and was it 17% of cars last year sold were zero emission. 50% of buses, 50% of mopeds as well. So those small, the pizza delivery and that sort of thing. Again, ideally suited for an electric, in this case, zero emission solution. So, we always myopically focus on, how's the car industry doing? How do we get the zero emission cars? And by that is, of course, the large bulk of, so 60% of our emissions, of our greenhouse gas emissions, come from cars. 20% from vans, 20% from trucks, 3 or 4% from buses, only a small percentage from power two-wheelers, from motorbikes and mopeds and things. But, taxis should be zero emissions. Buses should be zero emissions. Mopeds, absolutely ideally suited. Urban delivery vans, and we're seeing some really good inroads in that space. I think, was it Royal Mail? I think they've just hit 4,000 vans, electric vehicles, the other day. Quite quiet. And I remember talking to Royal Mail a few years ago about this, and there was, but that is a huge fleet, and that's, that is a really material step forward that maybe we're not celebrating enough, because that's probably more impactful. Those vans, having seen what Royal Mail vans do, it's a bit like a dust cart, a refuse vehicle. Refuse vehicles are down your street, slow speed, with their idling or whatever, and they should be zero emissions. So let's hit the low-hanging fruit, really hard, before we grapple with the biggest, longest, heaviest, most challenging ones at the moment.
Yeah, and it's like anything. People are very quick to point the finger, but not notice all the wonderful things that are going on. So that's the biggest thing, isn't it? So if we go on to the EV energy task force, I was going to ask you. So how did you bring automotive and the energy sectors together? In some ways, it makes perfect sense to me, knowing what I do now. But what was it for you?
Well, I think it was, again, if I can go right back to the 90s, I was part of the team working on what was the auto oil program at the time, trying to get the automotive industry and the oil industry to work together on, can we make fuels better and engines work better with fuels? And there's always things you can do with the two of them and improve them. But it was a bit like this, auto and oil were always a little bit at loggerheads. So it was an interesting time. And then what we found, going forward, we realised quite quickly in the electric vehicle space that essentially, we're talking about an energy and a mobility spectrum. So we're trying to get energy and mobility to work together, and the vehicle is almost a tool in the middle of that. But the infrastructure and the way you get that energy into the vehicle is far more flexible, far more challenging in some respects when you talk about electric vehicles. So we realised quite quickly, and that's where I think Zemo is well placed. We've got this very wide community, broad church of people. So we're really well placed to bring these different voices to the table and start grappling with some of the related issues, rather than a very narrow automotive perspective. And we actually started something called the EV network. I think there's another EV network now that's evolved. So really just started to realize that actually electric vehicles is now, it's not just a vehicle technology, it's an energy delivery, energy storage, and vehicle technology challenge. So we've got to have these guys talking together. And if they are working together, it suddenly opens up all sorts of opportunities. And you can see that now with things like, the flexible services and, smarter charging and all these sort of vehicle to grid, all these sorts of potential things that you can do with electrons that you can't do with gasoline and diesel. You're not going to feed gasoline back into your house and use it to heat up your hot water or whatever. So we started bringing people together, and it was some of the energy network team and people like EA Technology who, they had huge experience in that space, and they were starting to do work. We were seeing the energy sector looking at electric vehicles and doing projects on electric vehicles. So you'll probably remember Electric Nation as a project, which was quite an interesting one about charging vehicles. But it was driven from the energy space, and we were sort of talking to those guys. Well, actually, why don't we try and bring our experience with automotive and our links into the automotive? The SMMT and people like that. We're probably closer to. Let's all try and talk the same language. Let's all work together. And from that, we sort of developed the concept of the Electric Vehicle Energy Task Force, which essentially was government saying, yeah, we really get this, and we really support the principle of trying to get auto and energy to work together in this space. Zemo, you're in a really good position. Zemo and the Energy Systems Catapult. Why don't you work together and we'll fund you? So we were funded by government to create and form the Electric Vehicle Energy Task Force and really start to grapple. The idea was, how do we make sure the energy system isn't a barrier and arguably is the enabler to large-scale uptake of electric vehicles? So the focus was really on the car sector and charging. So we haven't put as much focus on the heavy-duty sector, which is really interesting now. But things like smart charging, things like charge points, things like the energy system. How do we make sure we've got enough of Graham's national grid wires in the ground and enough of the ES at the system operator, flexibility, and we're making that work with the vehicles so that the infrastructure isn't a barrier to uptake. And you probably read the same papers that I do, and at the moment there is some narrative that says infrastructure is holding electric vehicles back. I don't necessarily subscribe to that same voice, but that's certainly some of the narrative that's coming out. And so how do we address that? And I think the EV Energy Task Force, it's been published some pretty big scale reports about what we need to do, what are the enabling conditions that we need for 2030, 2035. And that is now sort of lifting itself up. So we're expecting in the next sort of month or two a move from what was the EV Energy Task Force into something slightly different phraseology that government again is going to support. So hopefully watch this space and we'll carry on pushing this whole agenda forward.
It's brilliant. I think it just needs to do it. And like you say, there's always going to be negativity, isn't there?
It's unfortunate. I mean, the constant rocks being thrown across between electric and hydrogen always worry me. We're going to need, hydrogen is part of the energy system. Exactly what role it's going to play within transport, in road transport in particular. I think there's definitely opportunities in various places. I think we haven't fully established it yet. So let's not burn all of our bridges, if I can use the
pun.
Analogy. Before we've really realised. So we're part of, and we've been supporting the zero emission road freight programme, which is big, multi £200 million of funding for heavy duty trucks. What's going to be the right solution there? Because it's a really challenging environment, and getting the best out of that, from an efficiency perspective. In an ideal world, you want to deliver the electrons directly to the motor in real time. So an overhead catenary, an overhead wire is the least lossy system, the most efficient system of getting electrons to a motor and driving a vehicle forward. Lots of challenges with that. Batteries are good, but there are downsides. There's resource downsides there, and battery capacity, weight, charging, into megawatt charging and things. So hydrogen as an energy carrier is potentially quite a useful one, but I don't think we've fully understood. So we will be running projects on both hydrogen trucks and battery electric trucks, looking at these and trying to sweat not only the vehicles. The vehicles are arguably the easy bit. I think we know how to build a hydrogen truck, an electric truck, a catenary truck. It's actually an energy and operations system that we really need to grapple with and understand. And then relate into the wider world, because trucks don't just stay on this island. They do go across to the continent and things. So we need to work out what's happening there. So it's a really interesting time in that space.
And I was going to say, at the moment, it's like you said about data earlier, isn't it? It's about gathering the data, because you can't move forward until you've got the data to prove it. Otherwise, it's just theory, isn't it?
Yeah, you've got to measure it, and you've got to measure it from different perspectives, because everyone's got a slightly different view on the world and what's important. So, I mean, we're doing work at the moment about, what data we need from that zero emission road freight program. And I think that's an area where Zemo can really help, that we don't come to it with a sort of hidden agenda. It's let the evidence speak for itself, and the right solutions will sort of bubble up. And so but getting good data, measuring it properly, getting it from the real world, that sort of thing. That was part of my background, real world testing of vehicles, real world cycles. There's nothing like sort of kicking the tires and seeing how it works in the real world.
So you're saying you're a data geek then, are you?
A bit of a data geek, I'm afraid. Yeah, I think that what I do enjoy though is and I guess we'll come on to it, is making data work for the user, and that user might be the consumer. And there's an awful lot of people that don't want to go and buy their next car with a spreadsheet and lots of time trying to work out TCO. They just want a nice shiny one that does what they want. Yeah. And that's where when we spoke at the start about how do we make good information accessible to different people, and charging terminology is a really, really interesting one at the moment that we're grappling with. What is fast? What's rapid? Is fast faster than rapid? Is mega better than ultra? What's slow? What's standard? And how does that work? And most people don't want to, they don't want to be trying to sort of fathom this out. So we've got. It's great for me. I want a 175 kilowatt charger doing this and for that long, and charging curves and all these sorts of things. But yeah, it's really, really interesting trying to get data, making data work for the audience.
Yeah, it's funny. I was listening. I don't know whether you got a chance to listen to so I always talk about the EV Cafe, but they had their webinar on last week, and they put out a poll saying, do you think people want to hear about the kind of the fast charging, rapid charging? I suppose my thinking is, I want to know when I take my car, how long am I going to be there? What can I do while I'm there? Am I going to be safe? I was talking to Kate Tyrrell last week, actually. Am I going to be safe when I charge the car? And if there's a problem, what do I need to do to kind of manage that? So I'm not necessarily interested in the minutiae. I do want to know a little bit, but I'm sure other people aren't as interested in it as I am.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I think this is one of the things that we're moving from the early adopters or EV geeks, if I can call them that, and we're moving into the mass market. The mass market is a huge range of different people and different requirements, and that's part of the challenge I think we are facing, and that's where some of the narrative about the network and the infrastructure not doing what people need is coming from. That it's people don't know what they need. You'll have experienced this. Once you've been in there and used it and driven, oh yeah, actually this is quite straightforward. Yeah. But it's a bit like giving your grandparents, or in my case your mother, an iPhone. I've got no idea what this does, and so it's those sorts of things that we've got to get over. Things are moving so quickly that it is quite challenging for some people. But I think, the one of the areas that the EV Energy Task Force and our team are working on quite actively is things like complaint handling. So having a consistent way of raising a concern about charging problems. At the moment, if you get a home charger in a car and at home it doesn't work, is it your grid? Is it your charger? Is it your car? Is it the communication between the two? Is it some problem with your tariff? You end up getting thrown from pillar to post. So things like that, when you're out and about, who do you phone? As you know, we've got multiple charging networks. And then have you got mobile coverage when you're there, which is a particular challenge. Yeah. So is it the fault of the mobile system? Is it the fault of the charger? There's so much going on. It's a hugely complex sort of energy communications data system and mobility system. And quite frankly, most people just want to get from A to B and then top up easily and have a coffee at the same time and on their way. So how do we make that work for everybody? We've certainly got a job for a little while yet.
It's kind of going back to that behaviour change, isn't it? Really, and sort of like your travel behaviour has to change because you have to be a bit more thoughtful about it and making sure that you know that actually things like your phone is charged, so that you're not going to run. It's easier said than done, isn't it? But kind of making sure all these things are in place. But when I'm travelling around, I know how much petrol I've got in my car at the moment, so I kind of know how many miles I need to do before I need to put some more petrol in it. And surely that's a very similar, and I don't want to run out of charge on my phone, so surely it's just a slightly different version of that, isn't it? Kind of where you just have things in place.
I think so. I mean, one thing I would say is that my experience of the range meters on electric cars they're very good. They're very accurate, and so it is pretty clear. And we're now we're seeing consolidation of the charging networks in commercial ways. Obviously you've got people like ZapMap who do some really, really good work. I mean, Melanie and Ben have done an excellent job there in creating what is the iconic and is the government approved network picture. So they've done a really good job, and we're seeing a lot of the players sort of consolidate charging networks to make the payment much easier via one card. I was using one the other day where actually you can allocate any RFID card to this network, so you don't have to get a separate card for them. So they're all learning and thinking about this and working out how to do it. I've got things like Octopus Go, who've got their own Electroverse sort of system as well. So, I don't charge up as much in public as maybe a lot of people, but I've had very few problems. It's been interesting at times. Even over this weekend, I was staying at a hotel and got there and said, "Oh, have you got a charge point?" There was nothing on ZapMap, and they said, "Yeah, we've got one, but it's not working." I went round there, it looked okay, plugged in, got a charge, no problem at all, and yeah, it was fine. I had to pay for it, and it was working with the network, but even the receptionist didn't know what it was about, and I think that's equally part of the problem. Getting it into the psyche that it's part of, because they'd know if there wasn't a mobile service, they would kind of be aware that we haven't got any mobile here or sort of thing. So yeah, it's interesting times.
It does remind me, of the days when we first started kind of all the networks where before, and I didn't have this for very long, but where you had your top up card for your phone, and you had lots of different top up cards, and then that all sort of changed to kind of like monthly. I have a monthly contract. Do you know what I mean? And then if you have a monthly contract, it's this, and if you do pay as you go, it's that. It kind of feels like it's starting to come together a little bit in that way.
It is. I mean, a few years ago, and you might remember there was a company called, was it WIM, WHIM, I think it was, that were doing a sort of mobility service. So it was a monthly fee, £300 a month or something, and you could get a scooter, a taxi. So you could buy this whole mobility package. Now I don't know whether it's still running, but if you like, it's that I want to be able to go where I want to go in the most convenient way. And at the moment that is often driving, but it shouldn't necessarily be. I mean, I live in Milton Keynes, so we've got three scooter hire systems here. We've got a bus service. We've got a demand responsive transport service. We've got the redways for cycling. We've got support for electric vehicles. But I tend to drive because it's easy. So how do we get people to change that psyche and create an environment that it is an integrated transport mobility sort of service that's just kind of easy, that's I think WIM were ahead of their time in that respect. I think that will come, but it's not quite there. The Oyster card, arguably in London, is sort of a precursor of that sort of thing, where you just kind of got on a bus or on a tube or whatever, and didn't really have to worry about it. And when we're seeing that in a couple of other metro spaces as well. So I think that sort of thing, and integrating that with rental cars, car club type vehicles, electric scooters, and other options is really a way forward for us if we can. And that's where we can get to hopefully fewer cars on the road, but if they're electric, sweated more, because it is about, batteries are great and zero emissions are great when you use them, but having buying and investing in that battery and the carbon and not using it isn't necessarily the right way of going about things.
No, I agree. Do you know, it's funny. I was thinking, so overnight, where I live on the close where we are in Reading, there's only there's 10 houses on this close. We had a power cut just in this close last night, and somebody said to me this morning, "Yeah, but you should have been asleep. It shouldn't have bothered you that it was off from 1 o'clock in the morning, but it actually was off until 9 o'clock." And actually, I kind of said to my son, I said, "Oh, I wonder what that would have meant if we had an electric car. Would that meant we could have actually powered the house back, depending on whether we had a diverter on? I wondered whether we could have actually done, kind of kept the power going from an electric vehicle if it was charged and I didn't need to take it anywhere."
There's some. The guys at Cenex, we've done a lot of work with Cenex over the years, and Rob and the team there, they've done some really good work on vehicle to grid and vehicle to home, and there's a lot of. I think that's an area which is growing. I'm in the process of putting some more solar panels on and a home battery, because I think part of the challenge is that your car is mobile, so it may not be here when you want to either charge it up with the solar panels, or indeed here when you want to discharge and things. So there's a lot of opportunities there, and we're putting a lot of batteries into the system with electric cars. So how we use those effectively is really, really important. So yeah, I'm probably same as you, charging up carefully at night when it's the cheapest rate that I can, and thinking about that. And it's very rare that your car you run it down so low that there's no charge in it at all and you can't get somewhere. So it's learning how to do that effectively. It's a slightly different psyche, but it is relatively easy to mandate, and you can now hand a lot of that over to someone else to do it for you. So you can just tell them, I want my car and I need to go to Shrewsbury on Monday. Just make sure I've got enough charge in it and do it the best time for you as the grid. And that sort of stuff is great. That you hand over some of that control to people who can really sweat it.
I love the technology and the ability to be able to do all this stuff. It's amazing, and I always say it just blows my mind. And I think probably in 7 years' time, well, it's less than 7 years now, isn't it? I think we're going to be in a very different place again, and hopefully more people, more consumers will have embraced the technology and electric vehicles and other alternative methods of transport. I kind of hope I would see it as, like you said, it is a very interesting time, and I'd love to be a fly on the wall and be able to look forward in 7 years' time and kind of actually be able to see now. But let's just see how it works.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that people can do is just try something different. I mean, you'll know that if you go and try out an electric car, one of them may work for you, one of them may not work for you in different things, but actually, this is relatively easy. I mean, we ran a team day where I got the whole of my team. We came up here to Milton Keynes to the EV centre when it was, and went out, drove electric cars, and went and charged them as well. Because it's not just about driving them. You got to go, oh right,
absolutely.
That's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
I understand how to do that. And once you've done it once, or the same with an electric scooter, try it. Okay, well, I can see how this can work in some situations. Or I don't know about you, but for years and years, I had never taken a bus. I just hadn't needed to.
Let's spot the rubble and stinky. Yeah.
Yeah, but actually they do work pretty well in a number of situations. And you wouldn't dream. Well, I wouldn't dream of driving into London. I'll be perfectly honest. It's just not the right sort of thing to do. So try something different and experience as many of these different opportunities as possible, because Once you've done it once, it's an awful lot easier to use it in the future. And that's what I think, getting more people to experience an electric car, electric bus, electric bicycles. There's some really, electric bikes are incredibly good and incredibly effective for old fat people like me that struggle to cycle up hills now. So they are a godsend, and I think more people should try that sort of thing as well.
Yeah, I think you're right, and it's about using this mix that works for everybody, because it's not one size fits all for everybody, is it? It's
No.
whatever is suitable for you. I've got friends and colleagues who kind of have said to me, oh well, I'm probably I'm going to be one of the last to move over to electric because I like my diesel or petrol car. Well, carry on for a little while, but actually be open to be a bit open-minded about these things.
Yeah, I'm one of the things that we're working on is the role of plug-in hybrids, PHEVs. I've been running a range extender for 10 years now, almost, or 8-9 years. And actually, as a technology, it works very well, and it's an easy step into running in electric mode. And if it does 30-40 miles, most of your mileage, most of your journeys are done, and you haven't got any of that angst. So I still think there's a role for those. I mean, I know the purists sort of hate them with a vengeance, but they're part of the solution.
Yeah.
Hydrogen is part of the solution. All of these things, even right now, we're still pushing on low carbon fuels. So we've got 40 million vehicles on the road. 98% of those, or 97% of those, are still running on gasoline and diesel. What can we do about cleaning those up whilst we change as many as possible over to zero emissions? Yeah. So let's not be so myopic that we only focus on this one sort of direction. We've got to do everything. We've got to use every tool in the box to get us to where we need to be. The climate and air quality challenges are so great that we can't rely on just one approach. We've got to really throw the kitchen sink at it.
Absolutely.
Sorry, far too many analogies there.
No, I like analogies. That's absolutely great. That's great. Well, listen, to finish off with, what I wanted to ask you was, can you let everybody know what the web address is, so that they have a look?
Absolutely. Yeah. So Zemo partnership. I mean, we are a partnership organisation, so people working in space. So zemo.org.uk. We're partly government funded, not for profit. Really important point. We're here for the good of the industry, and it's really about joining people up and trying to accelerate transport ultimately to zero emissions.
Yes.
So that's where we're going, all of us, and we're here to help everyone get there successfully. And
if, I mean, you are a CEO and you don't want loads of people approaching you because you're probably very, very busy, which I know you are. Is there a kind of a contact us sort of page on the website if people are interested in talking to somebody?
Yeah, absolutely. On the website, the best email is hello@zemo.org.uk. So just send a message to hello. It'll probably end up somewhere in my desk. I normally get to see most things. We're a small team, a small and perfectly formed team. So we get to see it. But yeah, LinkedIn, websites, Twitter, all of the social and things like that. We're keen to engage with people in this. We're not ostensibly customer facing. We're very much a sort of B2B, but what we hope we can do is help those that are customer facing really get to grips with this huge sort of experience and resource that Zemo has access to in terms of our membership. So hopefully we can help you in terms of your customer facing activity, really make it work.
Brilliant. Do you know what I should have said right at the beginning as well? Congratulations on making the GF 100 last week.
Thank you very much. I wasn't available. I was away, so I couldn't sit there and celebrate with Rob and Graham. But no, it's always a good event. And Greenfleet, I've known the guys at Greenfleet since they started again back in 2004. So they're a good bunch. Colin and Jason have done a really good job there. And there's some great people on there. And I think I said in some of the social, it's people that make the difference. It's not organisations. It's people and partnership, which is really what it's all about.
The sector is just so open and welcoming and caring, and actually all want to do the right thing they all want to do the right thing for the right reasons, which which, so for those of you who aren't in the sector and are watching or listening to this, then just start delving into it, because it's really, really interesting. Some of the stuff you'll see, especially on LinkedIn. There's a lot of chatter on LinkedIn, and probably Twitter. I know Instagram a little bit, but there's a lot of chatter goes on LinkedIn.
Yeah, there's a lot of chatter. I think that's a good way of putting it. Yes,
good chatter, as in lots of information out there, and the majority of it is positive. And if there's any negative, there's always somebody who will be there to kind of say, right, well, actually, you might be thinking that, but it's also have you thought about this? So I like that. It's not kind of backstabby or anything.
It's a great place to be, working in at the moment. Really exciting times, good people doing good work, and on the whole, really supportive of each other and how we move this forward, and thinking about the long-term aim and all the users. We've moved on from that. Lots of men in white coats in sheds, sort of celebrating success and a new battery chemistry, to actually this is about helping people, and that ultimately is what I enjoy doing, is helping people.
I'm the same, absolutely the same. So on that note, I'm going to say thank you, Andy. I really appreciate it. This has been really, really a brilliant conversation. So I don't know what you were saying about, I knew it was going to be good, and I know everybody else have found this really, really interesting. So on that note, thank you ever so much. And I'm going to say goodbye to everybody else, and I'll see you all next time. Bye. You've been watching Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. Don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell icon, and you'll receive all of our weekly videos. Thanks for watching. See you soon.